My name is Anders Adolfsson, and I am Head of Global Marketing here at Scandidos. First of all, thank you very much for joining this webinar about a user's experience with the Delta IV Phantom Plus in a multi-machine department. Focus is on the work around the Halcyon, Ethos, and the MRIdian. Very short about Scandidos. Scandidos has a broad product portfolio, which is called the Delta IV family. This portfolio makes it possible for us to offer patient QA solutions from prescription to final fraction. And one of the strengths is that all products are utilized on the same software platform, which means you can compare the results from any of our solutions in the same software. With me today, I have our guest and keynote speaker, Ulf Bjelkengren from Herlev and Gentofte Hospital in Denmark. Mr. Bjelkengren is manager of the technical division in the oncology department and has been at Herlev for 14 years. At the Department of Radiotherapy, Ulf's main focus has been the installation of new equipment and new modalities for patient treatments. And his topic today is Delta IV systems in a multi-machine department. And he will address patient-specific QA, commissioning, and upgrades. Please welcome Mr. Bjelkengren.
Thank you so much, Anders, for inviting me to have this talk. Well, we have been using Delta IV for a number of years in Herlev, and maybe Delta IV systems in a multi-machine department, but I guess it will make sense when describing the department a little bit further. So, an overview of my talk. We'll talk a little bit about our department, what we're using, machines, talk a little bit of the patient-specific QA workflow that we are utilizing, whether we're using the Delta IV or not, and for what not. Delta IV for commissioning and upgrades in the clinic, and a little bit about the role that the Delta IV played in the first treatment on the Varian Ethos system, and of course also the role of the Delta IV on the ViewRay MRIdian system. So I'm not paid to give this talk, and we are receiving money for various projects. Herlev Gentofte Hospital is basically two hospitals under one administration. In total, well, on the hospitals in total, we are 6,300 employees. Herlev, where I work, is located in the eastern parts of Copenhagen, and you can see on the arrow where in Copenhagen and where at the hospital that the radiotherapy department is located. Herlev Hospital is also the highest building in Denmark of 120 meters. I think there are some telemasts that are higher, but any building that is used for locating people, this is the highest one. We are treating about 3,000 patients per year in the radiotherapy department and give about 50,000 fractions per year. And for that, we're using 5 Varian TrueBeams, 1 with HD M.Sc, 2 Varian Halcyons, and 1 Varian Ethos. We have 1 ViewRay MRIdian, and for the TrueBeams, we have 3 BrainLab ExactTrack systems, of which 1 is the new ExactTrack Dynamic. We're testing the workflow, and we will upgrade the other 2 systems later. Scandidos and Herlev. We got our first Delta IV back in 2008. I guess we weren't the first one to use it, but at least we were early adopters. Back in 2018, we stood in front of a commissioning task of 4 new TrueBeams and 3 Halcyons. So we figured it was a good idea to update the measurement equipment. So we procured a Delta IV Phantom Plus for that task. And And it was also 2018-2019 where Scandidos was working on their MR compatible Delta 4 system. So we bought one of those for the commissioning of the ViewRay MRIdian, and I think it was March in 2019 where we got that Delta 4 system. Our workflow with the patient-specific QA at Herlev, we mainly have two workflows. We have the Varian workflow and we have the ViewRay workflow. If we're starting with the Varian workflow, we mostly rely on the Mobius 3D independent dose calculation system from Varian. And we have a couple of complexity metrics on the plans. Treatment plans that we're utilizing is mainly monitor units per gray. And if we are within the boundaries of what is acceptable and what is normal, we don't use the Delta 4. Then we go directly to treatment from the Mobius system. But if we have something that fails in the Mobius 3D system, or we have a really complex plan, we of course use the Delta 4 system to verify the treatment plan before treating the patient. We're also using the Mobius FX. We're taking the delivery log files from the accelerators and calculating the delivered plan based on the log files for a second verification of the treatment. For the ViewRay system, it's a new system for us. We don't have that much experience in it. There is an independent dose calculation algorithm, but with our current workflow, we are measuring all plans on the Delta 4 system on the ViewRay MRIdian. Going back to the Varian system, the absolute majority of our plans are dynamic plans. I think the only plans that we use normal open field techniques are tangential breast plans. Otherwise, we are heavy VMAT and IMRT users, even for palliative cases. So with 50,000 fractions or 3,000 patients per year, it would be an impossible task to measure all plans before treatment delivery. We also use the Varian HyperArc for stereotactical radiosurgery. For that, we have a special QA workflow, and that is based on film dosimetry. Delta 4 and commissioning and upgrades in the clinic. With the Scandidos software for the Delta 4, it's really flexible, so it's easy to compare it to what you want to compare with. So we use it a lot, of course, when commissioning new machines to compare one machine to another machine, and of course the Linac versus calculation when commissioning new accelerators. What we've also been using the Delta 4 system for has been upgrades in the clinic of the treatment planning system. Using the Delta 4 system and I would say baseline patients or baseline patient plans that are calculated whenever doing new upgrades and comparing that to previous calculations and measurements, we can track any changes in treatment planning algorithms and of course reduce the risk of any gross errors due to the upgrade. We like the software, it's flexible. You can change the reference data, you can import new dose, you can compare to other measurements and so on. So use your imagination. We also now when starting the installation of the new accelerators back in 2018, we had one TrueBeam that was installed back in 2011. Where we measured our own beam data for that machine. But since that, Varian has released their golden beam data, and we wanted to see if it would be an option to use the Varian golden beam data instead of our own measured beam data. Maybe I should say that we're only using one set of beam data for all true beams, so we're basically just verifying that the output of the machine profiles and so on are the same. So one beam data set. So for that we used the Delta 4 system. We calculated plans on the Varian golden beam data, and we calculated plans on our own beam data, comparing relevant treatment plans in the Delta 4 software, and our conclusion was that our own beam data was superior to the Varian golden beam data, so we actually stuck with our own data, rejected the golden beam data. So that is one idea what you can use the Delta 4 software for. Delta 4 and Varian Ethos. We did the first patient treatment on the Varian Ethos in the world back in September 2019. And just a short what led up to that was in last day of August, we started to convert one of our Halcyon machine to the Ethos. The Linac, what's in the room is the same. But all IT infrastructure and so on is completely different to a normal Varian Halcyon. So commission new IT infrastructure, added some computers in the control cabinet for the Linux, and that was done at September 5, where the work started with verifying the conversion. And here the Delta 4 played a big role. We measured treatment plans, we tested open fields and so on, until we felt confident that the system was performing. So on September 9, a little bit more than a week after, we treated the first patient. And during the first 4 days after that, we treated 5 patients and 14 fractions, and mostly bladder patients. And also considering the bladder is a really changing organ, it's also the type of treatment that makes the most sense to use adaptive treatment for. But the Ethos project didn't start in August. It started already back in April 2019 when we installed the first Halcyon, and that machine went clinical in May. And shortly thereafter we received an emulator of the Ethos system from Varian. And since the Halcyon and the Ethos is basically the same machine, we could use the CT data and CBCT data from patients on the Halcyon, run them through the emulator. We did that with more than 70 patients, created about 1,000 plans, simulated a couple of hundred fractions on data from Halcyon. And we had about 100 plans that went through dose verification with the Delta 4 and the Mobius 3D. And since we could make the patient plans on the emulator, we could also export the DICOM files with the RTPlan file and deliver that treatment plan on a Halcyon on the Delta 4 Phantom. So we had a lot of work already prepared and already done to verify the system before we even got the Ethos. And here the Delta 4 played a really big role. It was a measurement system we were really confident with, and it's easy to use. And what we're using the Ethos system for now is mostly pelvic patients. There are different workflows. There is what is called the IGRT workflow, where you're using the Ethos as a normal machine, and then you have the adaptive workflow. And for the adaptive workflow, it's mainly bladder patients at the moment, but we're starting up a couple of new protocols soon. The ViewRay MRIdian. We started installation of the ViewRay in 2018, and we treated the first patient in summer of 2019. We were planning to do that a little bit quicker, but we had some facility issues that led to a delay. We had one quite catastrophic water leak in the room, which actually led to the magnet quenching, which was not a nice phone call to receive. But at least we got the CE approved Delta 4 as soon as it was approved in 2019. I think it was March, something like that. So we commissioned the system and started working on creating plans right away. And creating plans on a ViewRay when you are used to using Varian Eclipse is quite of a bit of change. So it creates quite a lot of challenges with a completely new machine. It's not only a completely new Linac, it's a completely new treatment planning system. It's a new type of Linac, MR Linac. So you have the magnetic field, you don't have the field light, you don't have any imagers and so on. So you have to think a little bit different. You also have a pre-configured beam data. You have a different geometry for calibration. So you can't reach SSD 100 in this machine. You have to rely on the lasers because you don't have any field light. On the TrueBeam and on the Halcyon, at least you can take images of the Delta 4 Phantom to help in alignment if you'd like. You can't do that on a MR Linac. I guess the electronics of the Phantom wouldn't like the gradients and you wouldn't get any signal either. But one function in the software that is really useful for MR Linac is the optimize phantom position. And also this is not only the optimized phantom position, but also the Delta 4 software. We wanted to buy the Delta 4 because we knew the Delta 4. We've been using Delta 4 for so many years. We're used to creating plans, deliver on Delta 4. So I would say that either a plan delivered with a treatment plan made on a MRIdian or a treatment plan made in Eclipse on a TrueBeam or a Halcyon. If the plan quality passes on one machine and it passes on the MRIdian, I would say that that is also a quality metric that you can use for something. And it also makes us confident that we know what we're doing on the ViewRay MRIdian. Of course, for adapted plans on the MRIdian, we can't use the Delta 4. For that, we are relying on the ViewRay supplied independent dose calculation system. And that was all that I had for today. So thank you for listening, and also great thanks to all awesome colleagues at Herlev. It is them who has made the most of this work. I'm merely presenting it. So I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulf, for that presentation. And I have one question here. Do you treat prostate patients on the MR Linac?
No, we do not. Many centers are treating prostate patients on the MR Linac, but we're not doing that. We are a treatment on the MRIdian. It takes something between 30 minutes and 1.5 hours. Of course, a prostate patient wouldn't take 1.5 hours on a MRIdian, but say 45 minutes. And we can have a prostate patient in and out of the room in less than 10 minutes on either the Halcyon or the Ethos system. So I would say the value for the prostate patient being treated at MRIdian is low compared to being treated at a Halcyon or an Ethos system. We would like to use our technology where it makes sense, and in some way we are competing with ourselves with different equipment. But for example, for liver tumors, or where you have tumors near intestines and so on, where you really want to make sure that you are seeing all the time what you're hitting, then the MRIdian is superior to the other systems. But for normal treatments, 2 grays times 35, that makes more sense for the patient to receive on a Halcyon or an Ethos.
Another question, what pass and fail criteria do you use for the MR when you do the MR with the phantom?
We use the same pass-fail criteria that we're using for one, and that is basically 95%. And I can be mistaken here, but I think we are at the 3%, 2 millimeters of those normalized to local gamma. But we're not only relying on the gamma, but it's the plan quality in total. So we're normally looking at the profiles and so on. Maybe not so much on the MRIdian, but for a VMAT plan with a few monitor units per arc, sometimes the local gamma doesn't make sense, and so we're flexible in reviewing the plans.
Here's another question. What is the typical distance for the optimized phantom position with the ViewRay?
That was an excellent question, I must admit. I can't give you that number. But it's not millimeters, it's a millimeter in that range. Yeah. Okay. So we have QA on the lasers daily compared to an imageable phantom. But lasers are lasers, and especially lasers mounted on a wooden structure like a Faraday cage. You have some uncertainties in that, of course, but there is a QA routine. But then again, it is a problem for a Delta 4 Phantom, but it's not a problem for a patient because you are actually seeing the patient, but you can't see the Delta 4 Phantom.
I have 2 more questions here. What max percentage dose difference do you use in the Delta 4 gamma index calculation for Halcyon?
I have to check that one up. Maybe you, Anders, can get that in an email and distribute. I can't say that from the top of my mind.
Okay, I'll take that with me. How many times does a measurement fail to pass gamma criteria for true beam Halcyon MRIdian? And have you a relation between the plan complexity and gamma pass rate results? Tricky question.
Of course, we have plans that fail our criteria, and it is typically large IMRT, highly large complex IMRT plans that fail. But then again, the plans are complex. But it is rarely that we are below 90% passing rate on the gamma criteria, and reviewing profiles, optimizing positions, and basically evaluation on the measurement based on experience on how it is. We approve many plans. Of course, we have had plans that no, we're not sure about this. Let's find another way how to plan this patient. But it's rarely that it fails. And I'm not sure if, and that is the relation. I wouldn't say that there is a certain relation that the plan necessarily fails. Looking at the TrueBeam or Halcyon, you have a quite advanced monitoring system for MLCs and dose rate and dose and so on. So I'm not sure, it could also be that you're approaching the limit and you're venturing into where you have uncertainties in the measurement equipment as well. So it's most likely a combination with complexity, setup, and detectability in the system. Of course, the smaller the segment is, the more accurate you have to hit the detectors, and the more sensitive the detectors have to be, and so on. So I wouldn't say that. I can say that there is a clear relation.
Okay. Another one. Do you perform optimized phantom position based on the plan or beforehand based on a 4 field box plan?
No, we use that on the plan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, for example, machine QA and so on, we have other methods of securing that. We have imaging detectors in the right place. We have the MLCs are performing as planned, and so on. So the machine QA is differentiated from the patient-specific QA. So me personally, I'm not worried about the phantom being misaligned by 1 to 2 millimeters. Because we have track on that on the machine.
Gotcha. I think this questions concludes this webinar. Please take the opportunity to visit our website where you can find more useful information about our QA solutions, and I will take that question with me, Ulf, and we'll have a talk, and I will hand out the answer to all attendees.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ulf.
Thank you
for today's presentation, and thanks everyone for joining this webinar. Wish you a nice evening.
Have a nice evening or day, depending on location.
Thank you.